Good morning for 3 more minutes.
I was going to say it's good afternoon, and it's TGIF.
TTIF before I go on vacation, too.
There you go. Nothing like making my boss do a presentation before she goes
I
on
was just going to
vacation.
say, your performance review, I don't know. It's going to be a tough one. You're working me hard the day before vacation.
I know. We've only got 12 people on so far. We're just going to give people a couple minutes to get from one
Listen,
call
if
to
there's
the
only
other.
12 people, we'll just go have a
Have a
afternoon chat
boardroom.
somewhere, guys. Mhm.
I hope that didn't.
Charlene, are you setting the bar high there, like trying to make me nervous or what?
I was just about to say I didn't mean to sound sarcastic. I'm genuinely excited about this this Elevate Your Learning, because you're hosting this, right, Cindy?
I am. Well,
Well,
I'm going to talk for about an hour, I guess. Tammy's told me that's what I'm doing, Charlene. So she's making me work hard on the day before I go on vacation. So I don't know about this. Actually, I think we're going to have some fun. It'll be fun.
All right. I'm just peeking at the folks that had accepted that may not be joining us. We've got lots of people that might jump in sort of in the next couple of minutes, but we've got 46 people in the meeting. So I am going to kick it off and welcome everybody to our Friday Elevate Your Learning. We've moved this because we had a holiday for some Canadian folks on the Monday. And we've moved this session a couple of times just because it's really hard to get on the VP's calendar, one, and two, with the expectations that she's going to, not only deliver a module, but really create the content. So Cindy, thanks so much for not only pulling this together, but pulling it together on a really busy week and, 5 hours before you're going on your week's vacation, well-deserved vacation. This is a topic, guys, that,
I heard that, Robin.
We've done a lot of different, we've done a lot of product and we've done, more of the digital services offering, but we really are trying to look at areas in terms of personal development and growth that, as you're working on your development plans for the second half, and, what it is you want to do and, what are the skills that you need to do that. I think emotional intelligence is one of those things that we've all kind of heard the buzzword, but what exactly does that mean in our personal and our professional work and at home life, and how can we be more aware of it and what can we do to improve that? I actually had looked at some documentation and not to steal Cindy's thunder, but people that execute with really high emotional intelligence are the folks that are usually driving, better performance, and obviously better performance usually in this environment means larger commission checks. So something I think most people on the phone would be very interested in. So Cindy, thanks for preparing. I think what's going to be a great discussion
She's
today.
really excited because I didn't ask her to build my slides.
She did her own slides, guys, all by herself, and I think she did such a good job. I think I'm going to retire from this part of my job and officially turn it back.
That's not happening.
All right,
so
guys,
I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah.
And this is a personal passion of my own. So Margie, you can advance to the next slide. And something that I have personally spent a lot of time investing in myself for. Because I do think it's a skill that you need to master. It's not a skill that you are innately born with. So understanding how you respond in various situations, both physically and physiologically is really, really important. And it is something that you need to monitor on an ongoing basis, because depending on the impact to you as an individual, the response that you'll have in various different situations will be different. And the key will be for you to learn and understand, how do you manage to that. So hopefully by the end of the session, and I'm going to really be informal about this. I'm not going to formally present. We all know each other. I'm going to share some really specific learning principles, but at the same time, I want to have a conversation with all of you. And I would say I open the door up to all of you to, at some point in time, come and have a conversation with me about how I've grown in this space and how I continue to reflect on my own skill set to ensure that I'm growing and that I'm not getting caught in a rut around the importance of this skill and the importance of how this affects me in a day-to-day life, but more importantly, how it affects us as an organization. And, Tammy mentioned that it's about you professionally, but it's also about you personally. And the skills that you learn in this space will definitely help you in both of those areas. How you leverage the skills will feel a little bit different, because the higher the risk, the harder it is to manage the skill. Okay. So when there's definite impact to you or risk to you, your emotions are harder and harder to control. Okay. So we do have James on the phone, and James Morton is going to monitor for us the chat, because I do want this to be somewhat interactive. I'm going to ask a couple of questions as we go through, and if we were all in a room, I'd wait to see some of your faces, and certainly feel free to go on camera if you want. I'd love to see your faces. And I'd also see how you were responding in the room, so that I would adjust or calibrate my conversation based on how you were responding to the dialogue. And quite frankly, guys, that is emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence is being able to assess how somebody is responding to your message, your deliverable, how you're engaging with them, and then calibrating to that. So I think it's really, really important that if you were doing a session like this, or if we were able to, I would definitely be reviewing and looking at you in terms of adjusting my messaging, and or going backwards to make sure we were on the same page, and or understanding, okay, does this person think that we are sharing the same goals here in this meeting? Are we aligned in terms of what we're delivering? I saw somebody just post reading the room. Definitely. That's a key skill. You have to be able to read your audience, just like when you're engaging with a customer or you're engaging with a peer. Understanding and being able to assess how that person is responding to whatever you're saying is really, really critical. And that requires very specific skills that over time you need to hone, that you need to develop, but you need to understand, how do I know when I'm reacting emotionally? Okay, so that's what we're going to go through. Again, I want to have fun with this session. You all know me very well, so feel free to put your hand up, ask a question, let it be interactive. But I think Tammy only gave us till 1 o'clock. So, and I could talk about this topic, guys, honestly, for hours. So you can go to the next slide, Margie, for me. I have been trained in crucial conversations. So any of you that have gone through crucial conversations, it is something I'm trained to deliver, and I'm very passionate about, because there are a number of elements inside of that learning curriculum that really does speak to emotional intelligence and what's the importance of emotional intelligence. So we'll go through that, and we'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. I really want to spend some time talking to you guys about what are the and for everybody here, emotional intelligence for the rest of this deck we'll refer to as probably is your EI. So what are the misconceptions of what emotional intelligence are, right? So a lot of people think, oh, I can't voice my opinion because I will be viewed as emotional. That's not what emotional intelligence is, okay? I'm going to give you 5 attributes of emotional intelligence and the things and skills that you really want to self-assess and understand where you are on that spectrum, and then really put a developmental plan in place for yourself, so that you understand how you are responding in various situations. And this is the one that we're all going to not like. This is the one that's going to stretch us. The one is to lean into your discomfort, right? And that is putting yourself in those situations where you have to become the person that's operating with emotional intelligence. And it's get uncomfortable to get comfortable kind of thinking. And hopefully I'll give you some skills that will help with that. And then I want to talk a couple of seconds about why is EI important to you? Why is EI important to the business? Why is EI important to your growth? Okay. At the end of this, you all know I'm avid about reading and continuous learning. It's something that's very important to me. So I'll share some reading and some tools that you too can use as part of this. And if there's time left, which I'm not sure there will be, but I'll open it up for discussion. If there's no time left and we're right at the top of the hour, guys, what I would say to you is I welcome follow-up discussion with any of you. If you want to have a discussion with me around how I've grown and continue to grow in this space, I would welcome that from a learning perspective. Okay. And I have not mastered this skill. It is a skill that I continue to work on. So that's one thing I really want you guys to walk away with. I don't think anybody is proficient in emotional intelligence, because as the risk increase, your emotional intelligence goes down. And so it's really, really important that you have a good understanding of yourself and how you want to react in those situations. So emotional intelligence is really, for me, it's about self-awareness, right? It's your ability to recognize, understand, and effectively manage your emotion. So it's the heart in how you respond in a situation. It really is the heart. Okay. And it's really about the skills that you leverage to bring together effective communication. So you're going to be in a situation, and that situation can be highly sensitive or highly important to you. I'll use that word. And how you respond in that situation determines your emotional intelligence. And that is because you have the skills to recognize that you're reacting. You have the skills to understand what your goals are. And more importantly than anything, you have the skills to manage your response in that situation. That's why emotional intelligence is a learned skill. Okay. It's recognition, understanding, managing, and effectively leveraging all of those together to manage your emotions. Okay. We all have heart. We all care. We all feel. And it's different for each and every one of us. But knowing that that's happening is critically important. And knowing how it happens is also really important. So, what I say to that, what I mean by that is before you have a physical response, okay, before something actually comes out of your mouth, okay, you will have a physiological response to a situation. Does anybody know what that means? First hand up, James. We're going to take the answer. What's a physiological response to a situation? Let's go with Rob.
Sweaty palms, shaking, sort of, just wavering in your voice. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you have something that physiologically is happening to you. Your hands start to sweat. Okay. You start to sit back. You get tense. You get some feeling in your stomach. Okay. Your heart rate starts to climb. You're having a physiological response. Okay. And then,
Hey, Cindy, it's James. I remember early in my career when we started working together and I was developing my emotional intelligence, you used to tell me that all the time. Like I would be all wired and I didn't even see it coming, but yet you did. And you would say, James, what happens before you get that way? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. She goes, and you said, something in your body, you'll feel it in your body. And I remember, noticing then that I would clench my hands together or on the desk, and then I would, lose my cool. So yeah,
right.
this is something that I learned. I realized, oh, that's my tip. That's going to happen.
And we will all have a response. Believe it or not, we will all have a response. So your objective leaving this session is to start to learn what that is in you. Okay. It could be a nervous feeling. You get really anxious, right? You start getting something really upset in your stomach. And so what I'd ask you to do is think about what your physiological response is in an emotional situation. And then so that's the recognize, right? And when you understand that, then you can manage your physical response. Okay. And your physical response is, what do you say? What do you do? How does your body posture? Okay, that is your physical response that happens. And being able to master those two skills together is really going to improve your communication. And I think it's really interesting on the next bullet where it says, you know, most times having a high EI is more important in your personal life and your professional life than having a high CI, right? An IQ. And you would go, really? So I spend all this time learning my textbooks and learning everything I learned in my MBA, but that's not going to help me be successful? And how many of you have been in a situation where you said, wow, that person's just so smart. They're so smart, but they just don't get it. They're just not aware. That is the emotional intelligence piece. Okay. They do not have a high EQ. So they have their own agenda. They know the textbook of it, but they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to connect. They don't know how to have mutual purpose. Okay. The good thing is, though, they can be really smart and we can help them learn this skill. Okay, because it is absolutely a learned skill. So it's really important, guys, that everybody understands that you can be great at what you do, but if you don't have emotional intelligence, the trajectory of your success will decline over time, and it will decline as the situations become more high risk for you. Okay, and risk is a multitude of things, and that's what I want to just spend a second here. Risk can be financial. So if there's a financial risk to you, you can become really hot under the collar. Okay. If there's an impact to somebody you care about, you can become really hot under the collar. If this is about a career or an opportunity that you had in front of you from a position perspective, and somebody's taking credit for something else that you've done, right? You might start to get hot under the collar. So the risk, the higher the risk, the higher the emotion. Okay, so you have to really keep that in mind that when you're going into a situation, if you're going to manage these skills effectively, know how this affects you, know what's the importance. And then it's really important to you that you remember what is it that your goal is? What is it that you want to achieve? Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide. So I love this slide because there are so many misconceptions out there about what emotional intelligence is. But it's really important for me that you understand that this is not a situation where people are telling you not to be authentic, not to be you, because being you is really, really important, right? The authentic you is who we want you to bring to work every single day, right? So when you look at the kind of the top four, there's many of these that can be represented in terms of what are the misconceptions of emotional intelligence. One of the ones I think is really important to talk about is suppression of emotions. This isn't about, holding everything in, bottling up those feelings and not communicating how you feel in a situation. This isn't about pretending that they don't exist and moving on, because that will over time blow up in a different way. So it's really important that the intention is more about effective communication of your emotions and understanding how do you gain the best from that, not suppression. If you suppress it, the problem will grow and it will be more significant. Avoidance. Okay. So a lot of people, when they are in a situation of high risk, will avoid it because they don't want to be perceived as emotional. How many people have said, I don't want to be perceived as emotional. I don't want to have that label. I don't want to cry in a situation. I don't want to get angry. I don't want to yell. Okay. And that is because now people will avoid those feelings because then they get, labeled as being emotional and can't handle a difficult situation. This is about really learning how to manage those emotions in a truly constructive manner, because what you feel is real and your feelings need to be validated and discussed. And when they're validated and discussed, you will move on from that in a positive manner, and so will the other person. And that's constructive communication. And that's what your goals should be. Okay. The next one is overemphasizing the positivity. And we see this one all too often, right? And it's when people are unrealistic about how positive they are in a situation, and you just sit back and you go, come on, like, we're not going to make X amount of dollars in this situation because something has changed and nobody's talking about what that means to me, I get angry, right? When people do that to you, they don't validate how you're feeling, and you start to shut down in a room. You won't listen to what they're saying anymore. And when people start to shut down in a room, you might as well stop the meeting. You might as well stop the meeting. You might as well stop the communication if you have people shutting down. So when you have somebody going in and trying to sunshine and flowers everything, this is being recorded and I'm just being so authentically myself right now. When everything is just sunshine and flowers and people aren't being realistic about the impact to you and being authentic about the impact to you, that's when you're people are really starting to not communicate effectively. They're just shutting down around you and they're just looking, okay, it's 1 o'clock, is the meeting over yet? Okay, so this is not about overemphasizing the positivity. I don't want you to be sunshine and flowers when you come into my office. If there's something that you're not happy about, I want you to be emotionally intelligent about it. I want you to communicate effectively. I want you to communicate the issue and talk about it openly together. And the last one that I think is really important that I want to talk about is, this isn't manipulation, guys. This isn't about you being able to handle somebody else. This isn't about you being able to master somebody else so that you can get them to think your way. Because ultimately, in the long term, if you're manipulating somebody to feel the way you do or to understand and believe your perspective, long term, they will figure that out. So manipulation is really probably the one that focuses on genuine understanding and empathy of how somebody feels. And if you truly do that, you will be more successful in getting to a positive end. But if you don't, the person will recognize in the long term that this was for your mutual gain, your personal gain. And that will, over time, destroy a relationship that you have with somebody. And that's not what you want. You want to have the open communication about why something is important to you. And I keep using finances because we're all salespeople. But if you're talking to your manager and they don't understand why something is important to you in terms of a comp element, and they're not listening to the impact that's going to have on you, whether it's the results that are you're demonstrating, whether it's the territory opportunity that you've done the due diligence on, and you're not getting buy-in from them on that and understanding and appreciation of that, your anxiety and your frustration, even though you may leave that meeting because your manager's been able to, get you to persuade you to understand it, over time your frustration will go. You'll either leave the business, you'll look for a new opportunity, you'll do something because you won't be happy. So this skill is really important for you to be successful in your communication. It's also really important for managers and people leading others to be successful, because if you just walk out and we don't have a good understanding of each other's purpose in this, ultimately the outcomes will not be what any of us want. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. And this is where I think is probably one of the most important slides here. That, when you get this deck, you want to print this deck and go, where am I at on this spectrum? And first bullet, I think, is important, which is that emotional, and I've said it a lot, but I really want this to resonate with you. Emotional intelligence is a flexible skill. Okay. It's a skill that will go up and down with the degree of risk. Okay. And when the risk is low, you won't be emotional. When the risk is high, you will be highly emotional. And all of those physiological reactions we started to talk about will be there. I found a study that I thought was really, really interesting. And there was a study of 1 million people. Okay. And this 1 million people, 36% of the people in this group were not able to identify their emotions in the moment. So they were in a situation, and in that situation, post that situation, they couldn't tell how they were reacting. You should never let that be the case, because that means you're not managing and or controlling your own emotions. Okay. How are some of the ways that you can self-regulate your emotion? Any ideas? James, I'll get you to monitor the chat. Any ideas how you can manage or self-regulate, which is controlling your emotions? How can you do that? Step one is what? There's a physiological response. Think positively. I love that. What else can you do to control your emotions? Breathe, right? So you're in an emotional situation. You take some deep breaths, right?
Step back, breathe before speaking, take a deep breath, discretion, be disciplined.
I love those. I'm having a hard time seeing you guys as I'm seeing all the bullets come up. I love those, right? And what it is that you're doing something physical. So this is the key that I want you to really think about is when you're in an emotional situation and you are having a physiological reaction, as small as it might be, okay? You need to do something physical to trigger your brain to change how it's thinking. Okay. And this skill over time will improve. So if I'm in a situation and I'm getting really heated because somebody's saying something about my organization, there's one that's high risk for me, right? So I'm on a call and somebody's saying something that we're not doing well, high risk, my emotions start, my chair goes back. Okay. I can feel it happening. One of my keys that I will do because I will become very agitated very, very quickly is I will put my hands under my legs. Okay. So that's forcing, and I literally will push on my leg. And I know you guys are thinking, she's crazy. She's crazy. But I absolutely do that. I will sit here and apply pressure to my legs. I'm now having a controlled response to how my body is reacting in a situation. Okay. When I do that, my heart rate starts to decline and I start to think logically. Okay. So I'm thinking logically now. Now I'm starting to understand why are we having this conversation? I can act and respond more intelligently. Now I'm going to start to gather information. Okay, which is where you want to get to. You want to understand why somebody is reacting the way they are. Why are they saying what they're saying? If it becomes very heated, I'm just going to start throwing words, right? Or I'm going to shut down the meeting and I'm going to go to somebody's boss, or I'm going to do whatever I need to do, right? But I don't want to have that response because I want to gather information and I want to understand why somebody is responding. So skill one, I'm aware. I know that I can respond emotional in meetings. I'm very aware of that. Okay. So step two is I know how to regulate that in myself. Okay. So can I control my response? I can now. There was a time I couldn't. Okay. And sometimes your physiological response will change, but knowing that you're having a response in a situation is really important. Okay. The next one is motivation. Really thinking about what is it that you want to achieve in this meeting, in this interaction, in this communication. So try to, as somebody else is speaking to you or saying something, or you're in a dialogue, start thinking about what are my ultimate goals here? What am I really trying to achieve? And or use this skill as you approach a situation that you know is going to be highly emotional, because then that's kind of your center of your universe. You're always going back to what is it that I'm trying to achieve? Okay. And if you keep going back to that, all of the other factors that get introduced in a conversation are only noise then. They're not things that are going to derail the dialogue and how you're reacting and responding. Okay. So if your
Hey, Cindy.
goal is ultimately, yep.
Well, I just thought
Jamie?
you just said something, and I've been thinking about this. There's always a time where you don't know what you're walking into, or it kind of hits you by surprise, right? You can't always prepare for what your reactions are going to be. But there are things that I think for me that, the more prepared you are going into, I'll give an example. If I was a manager and I'm going to have a tough conversation with an employee, or if I'm an employee and I have to have a tough conversation with my partner, preparing for that discussion, and in terms of, okay, well, what happens if they react this way? How am I going to respond? And, a lot of preparation, I think, builds confidence, and you kind of go through the objections of what the conversation may be, or what the conversation what road it might go down. I think that helps you, sort of get in front of what that emotional reaction is, and makes yourself, self-aware right off the bat. So you go, okay, I expected them to say this or whatever. So preparation for whether or not it's a presentation or a difficult conversation, I think will go a long way to, maybe seeing a positive EI, as opposed to maybe where you've walked out and experienced, oh, that didn't go very well. or I didn't handle that very well.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more with you. So I think anytime that you can be more aware going into a situation, the better prepared you're going to be, because you're already going to have thought through some of these skills and some of the responses that you're going to get in a situation. What I want for you guys, though, is to get really good at managing yourself on a daily basis and being able to reflect and grow from that. So the reflection piece of emotional intelligence is where you're going to see the most growth. Okay, that's really where you're going to be able to sit down and say, okay, I just came out of that conversation with my partner. Because I think it's really important, guys, that you understand this isn't just about you at work, it's also about you at home. Just came out of that conversation and it didn't go well. Evaluate that conversation as it relates to these five attributes. Okay, were you self-aware? Was the motivation in line? Okay, were you regulating how you felt? And the next one that I think is really important is empathy. And empathy is a difficult skill to master, and that is that you're not going into a situation with your own agenda in front of you. You're going into the situation with mutual respect for how the other person may feel, and also trying to gain an understanding for what is important to the other person. Okay. And that is a difficult thing to do if you've got an agenda. So if you're going into a conversation, it's really important that you listen to how the other person is responding, or other people in a room are responding. Because if you don't, then you're not recognizing that there's two people in a conversation, or multiple people in the conversation with multiple goals that we're trying to achieve. And when you can get to a place that you're communicating on the why we're having this conversation, the chances of you moving forward in that dialogue are so much stronger. And the other thing that I think is really important is in that stage is the more data that you have that is realistic about the environment and the situation you're in, the better prepared you're going to be. Because if you have data that supports your position, and this is kind of how I operate in business every day, is if I have data that supports and/or kind of guides the dialogue, it takes all of the emotion out of the conversation, because now we're talking about the facts versus about how I feel. Okay. And so the facts will lead the conversation. And that is me going in there into a situation, kind of what Tammy said, which is that I'm very aware how others are going to respond to the positioning that I'm taking. So I'm bringing data to support my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one is social skills, which this one can be a little bit difficult in a world where we have social media and there's so many other platforms that people will push an emotional response out onto. But it's really learning the skill to figure out when and where and how do you navigate with finesse in social environments. So like I said to you, if I'm in a room and I'm presenting on a topic and I can see the arms start going like this, or the leaning back in the chair, okay, or leaning into my conversation, okay, then I can see the social cues that are happening in a room, that I'm going to start to use my skills that I've mastered from an emotional intelligence perspective to get that conversation on track to where I want it to go. So I may have 10 slides prepared, but I'm going to probably pause and go, and I've done this. Many of you who've worked with me over time have seen me do this. I will stop a room and say, okay, so something's happening here. I can feel it. I can see it. Okay. Remember, physiological, I feel something happening and I can see it. So that's the visual impact. And I will call an audible and say, let's talk about what's going on right now. And that's empathy. That's empathy, where I'm trying to learn what the other person's perspective is, because I may have gone into a room with a completely different appreciation for what that person is feeling or the group is feeling versus what they actually are. So empathy is really, really key. And it's okay to pause and learn what's going on with somebody else. Okay. All right, 12:32, and I'm not even through my slides yet. All right, let's go. Next slide, Marky. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but it is something that you may want to take away and stare at for a few minutes. And these are there's two attributes. One is personal and one is social. And kind of, if you think about it, it's all around your response and what you do. And so the way I want you to think about this is self-awareness we talked about, which is really how you understand your own emotions and how you access your strengths and limitations. I love that Tammy talked about role playing, because if you know you're going to go into a situation where it is really going to stretch your ability to see somebody else's response in it, bring somebody else there. And they can then help you grow to say, well, actually, that person was responding very differently than how you saw it. So self-awareness is really, really key in your own attributes, right? Really understanding how you react and what you do in a situation. Because remember, we've all been taught this from our moms and our parents. The only person you can control in a situation is who?
Yourself.
You, right? You can only control yourself in a situation. So understanding your attributes and managing how you are expressing those emotions and communicating those is really, really important, because if you are going into an emotional conversation with the intention of achieving your motivation, whatever the goal is, you're going to be most successful when you're really good at being adaptable and being able to flex your skill on managing yourself to get the best outcome of that situation. Okay? It's not about managing them, it's about managing you. Okay, I can see this person's getting really upset. I'm going to lower my tone. Okay? I'm going to pull back a little bit and give this person some space, because I can see that they're responding in a way that's not positive for the conversation. I'm going to take a couple of deep breaths and let some energy come into this room. That's emotional intelligence, and that's controlling it from your own attributes. Okay. And again, these are skills that over time you learn. If you don't try to reflect on a situation and say, what could I have done differently? That's when you won't grow. And I can tell you, any manager that in this building knows, one of the things that I do all the time is I reflect on conversations with my team on a regular basis. And there's people on this phone who I can see right now that I've picked up the phone the next day and said, I'm really sorry, that conversation did not go the way I wanted it to go. That was not the outcome I was looking for. Can we try that again? And that's me learning and growing. Okay. The next one is social awareness, right? So identifying the emotions in other people and learning to read them. So reading a room and understanding people, understanding the response you're getting from others is really, really important. And that empathy factor, authentic empathy too, guys. I think it's really important. It has to be authentic. Some people are like, oh yeah, I'm here, I care, but they're really not. People see through that very, very quickly. But if you're authentic about your empathy and you really care about how somebody else is responding in an environment, in a crucial conversation, they will know it. If you don't have a hidden agenda in terms of what you're trying to achieve, they will know it. And then the last one is, and it's in that social attributes, right, is use your emotional awareness of yourself and others to develop rapport and effective relationships. So when you're really good at this, when you do have a high emotional intelligence, you can really manage up and manage down in terms of your communication, and you can manage both ways. Like I talk to my daughter different than I talk to my husband, right? So sometimes it's the other way around too, depending on the day and night, right? I may be more directive with my husband. Just kidding. But it's true. It's like if you understand your emotional awareness of yourself and the others in the environment, then you can have a better relationship. And, I think of my 14-year-old, having a rapport with her and understanding what's important to her right now is, and anybody that has teenagers on the phone knows this, is really, really critical, because if she doesn't think I care about the things that are important to her, we will have an explosive conversation. But if I validate the things she's feeling and the situation she's in, we can have a better, more constructive conversation about how to improve or how to change the outcomes that we're faced with. Would you guys all agree? Okay. So think about that in both situations, both personally and professionally, because it's really, really key that you really think about them and how do you develop that relationship with them so that they believe that you care about them and that you're validating how they feel. It's not just about how you feel. Okay, next slide. So this is the one I said that's difficult, right? This is leaning into your discomfort, because it's not comfortable if you don't have emotional intelligence, and it's not comfortable if you're not willing to accept your role in this. And these kinds of situations will always be difficult, and they don't have to be. They don't have to be difficult. You don't have to feel frustrated. You don't have to feel anxious. If you get to a place where you're really talking about mutual respect, mutual gain, mutual benefit, and your objective is really to help get to a better place. So the first one is your self-assessment. In a few minutes, I'm going to share with you on the very last slide how you can better understand your personal strengths and areas for growth as it relates to your emotional intelligence. There is actually a survey, a little skills assessment that you can do at the end that will give you an assessment. It's very scenario based, so it'll determine based on how you respond in various situations what your level of emotional intelligence is. But I would also tell you that if you have a mentor, you have a really good relationship with your manager, you have a trusted confidant, go have that conversation. Say, hey, I attended a session today around emotional intelligence, and I really want you to tell me, how do I react in situations? Am I emotional? Do I handle the situation well? Do I speak with empathy? Do I engage you in the dialogue? Because then you'll know. And then, as I said a few minutes ago, self-reflect and be humble about it. Don't be afraid to pick up a phone and call somebody and say, that didn't go the way I wanted it to go. Let's start again. Like, here's what I care about, and here's what I care about for you, and here's where I hope we can get to. Okay? And that humbleness, I believe, guys, will take you a long way. Okay? Because when you're humble, you are your authentic self. And people will slow down and listen to what you have to say. And you, in your humbleness, will also be able to listen with a more acute ear. You will hear things differently when your objective and motivation changes. Okay. So mindfulness and self-reflection, I've kind of talked about that because I think that that's a big part of who I am, and practicing that on an ongoing basis is really, really key. And as I said, as the risk goes up, your emotions will change. That's why it's really important that you understand that depending on the situation you're in, you may be really great at EI, or you may be really bad at it. Is when you reflect on it that you can start to hone those skills and say, these are the kinds of situations that when I get into them, I can see that my EI starts to drop. So now I'm going to really focus on how do I master the skills when I'm going into a difficult conversation with my boss about, compensation, or I'm going into a difficult conversation with a peer about how they're communicating with me. You'll know when the risk is higher for you and your response is different.
Cindy, we have a kind of a really good question right on
Yeah.
that point. How do you deal with people with very low EI, even if you're doing all the right things and there's no progress in the conversation?
So good question, but I think number one is recognizing that the person is responding the way that they are is really, really key. And then responding with empathy, because empathy takes you much further than anything will take you. So when the person you're trying to communicate with understands that you're trying to appreciate where they're coming from and that you recognize their concerns, you will get much further along. And here's what I would tell you is that I think that that conversation is going to take a much longer time to get through. So you have to slow down in order to get to that place of mutual understanding, right? So you got to go forward with that individual and really lean into the person and try to connect with how they're feeling. Okay? And that, we've heard this vernacular forever and a day, but it starts with the heart. And if somebody has low EI, you got to start with the heart and really communicate from a point of I care and I want us to get to a place that this benefits both of our objectives. How can we do that?
Make it safe.
That would be my guidance. So and I think that leads right into the next skill, right? Is active listening, which is tuning into others' emotions and perspectives. And sometimes it makes you, one of the things we are notorious for doing is sitting in a dialogue and going, okay, what's my response going to be to this? What am I going to say? How am I going to handle this? What should I be thinking about right now? And that is about the worst thing you can do. Active listening means you're not listening to give a response. You're listening so that you understand. And if that requires you to take pause at the end of somebody's commentary to you or communication to you, that's not a bad thing. Because if you're more present in the dialogue, you truly start to understand where somebody is coming from. The other thing in active listening that sometimes people miss is that you're listening for intent. You're not listening for how do I achieve my goal? Okay? You're listening to really understand what is important to them, what is important for them, and really starting to appreciate that, because you may have missed something completely when you went into the dialogue. And if you don't listen to how they feel and what they're saying to you that's important to them, what is their motivation, you'll never get to a place where you're on the same, thinking it from the same perspective. And this is one I talk about a lot and I try to do a lot. So hopefully you guys recognize this, is that I always put myself in somebody else's shoes. So I'll say to a manager all the time, James, I'm looking at you, so I'm going to get you to validate my perspective. But I will say, put yourself in their shoes. How will they feel if you come into a conversation with them on this topic? How will that employee feel? How will that stakeholder feel? Put yourself in their perspective. And then that's how you approach the situation, right? So if they're a great employee and they've been doing everything you need them to do, but they've just had something fall off the rails for whatever reason, going into them and hitting that blazing, you're going to be like, whoa, 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 wait a second. This is one situation. What you want is somebody who comes in with empathy and says, hey, look, I know you're a great employee. You've been doing all the right things and you're performing in all the right areas. I just want to have a conversation. What happened? And stop talking. What happened? Stop talking. Don't assume that you know why somebody is reacting or responding or doing the things that they're doing, especially if you have a history of somebody else that tells you a very different story. So it's really important to put yourself in their shoes and give them an opportunity to respond to the situation before you tell yourself a story about what's going on. Because the minute you tell yourself a story about what's going on, the outcome will be radically different than what you want.
100%.
Okay. And then, some people, and I can say this, when I talk about those emotional regulation techniques, and I'm sure some of you chuckled on the phone when I said I sit on my hands, watch, you will see me do it. I actually do it. Or I've told managers in one-on-ones with them to sit on their hands or to cross their arms, and they kind of look at me with a hairy eyeball and go, are you kidding? Like, really? Like, I'm about to go into this conversation and you're telling me to cross my arms or sit on my hands? And I'll be like, yep, that's exactly what I want you to do. And it's because it's so critical that you pull the trigger in your system, in your body, that changes you from a physiological response and allows you to control your response. And the only way you do that is by doing something physical to say, I know this is happening, body, I know this is happening, and I'm not going to let it happen. So you need to have a way to regulate yourself, okay? And it has to be something physical. So those would be my thoughts to you on terms of how do you lean into your discomfort, especially when the risk in an emotional situation is high. Go in thinking about these skills and how do you master them in a difficult situation. Next slide, Margie. All right, so why am I even doing this? Number one, guys, is that, and it's really important to me that an emotionally intelligent workplace is healthier and more productive. That is the number one thing. A home environment that is emotionally intelligent is definitely going to be healthier and more productive, and the success you have raising your children and interaction is going to be so much more important. And you work for an organization that believes highly in having a growth mindset, and a growth mindset is emotional intelligence, right? You're always challenging yourself, because the only person you can control is yourself in a situation. So really thinking about the perspective of motivation, self-regulation, right? And really understanding what it is that you want to achieve from an empathetic perspective with that individual is key when you go into these. And so, I think the things I want you to think about when you think about why should I care about this situation is, number one, the improved communication you're going to have, right? Your ability effectively communicate with others, either on your team, quite frankly, with your clients, and or with your manager or at home, is going to go up exponentially. And it's not always going to work out, but if you pause and reflect on it, you're going to be able to improve that. The other thing that I think is really important is conflict resolution. We're always going to be in a situation where we don't agree. And, stretching ourselves from a situation of conflict is generally how we grow. And being comfortable going into that conflict and using these skills to get to a better place in terms of, mutual purpose and mutual goals, really is going to help us grow as an organization and you to grow personally, because we're going to be stretching you. I think that it's really, really important to have a high EQ when you're leading others, and trying to inspire others to be their personal best, because you're stretching people from their comfort zone, right? We talked about that person, James, that you said that has the low EI. Well, they're comfortable being there. Whether we like it or not, they're okay with being there. But the more we can help them grow and more that we can demonstrate to them that we have success by having a high EI, the better off they're going to be and we're going to be in terms of an overall team and or how we run as an organization. The other one that I think is really important is how many of you come into work and you've got that angst in your chest, or you've got to have a conversation with somebody and you just have that pit in your stomach and you think, oh my God, if I could just eat the elephant and get this done today, I would feel so much better. If you've got the ability to manage yourself, manage the emotion around this and how you're feeling, and understand that you have a purpose in going into that conversation, and you're able to communicate what that purpose is, you won't feel that anxiousness. You won't feel that degree of stress that you're feeling when you go into that situation, because you'll be able to quickly have the dialogue about, look, here's what I want for you. Here's what I'm hoping we can get to. And here's what I'm trying to achieve. It takes all of that stuff, the noise that's in the process or in the dialogue, away. And the gloves kind of go off and you see the person sit back in their chair and take a deep breath, and you can have a much, much healthier conversation. And it puts you in a better place. I know from my perspective, probably every day I have to have a conversation that's a difficult conversation, either with an employee or with a stakeholder or even, quite frankly, with a client. But if I don't go in with a preconceived position on what that person's objective is, then I can control how I feel much better, because I'm just going in there with, from my perspective, here's the things we need to do, and here's where I'm trying to get us to. And then I shut up and I listen to what the other person has to say. And I think the other thing that I think is really important in this section, guys, that I want to really have resonate, and hopefully you feel this, is that for me, emotional intelligence and creating an environment and culture in our workplace that is respectful of others creates high job satisfaction. So if you're in an environment and in a culture where you feel that you are validated when you feel a certain way, and that you can have an open dialogue up and down and sideways in the organization, you are going to feel much happier in the workplace. And that is very, very important to me. So I think those are the big ones. The other thing that, the last thing I'll leave you with on that one is that the growth mindset image there that we have is the kind of the last one, which is, if we don't control our emotional intelligence and learn how to manage our emotional intelligence, our ability to grow as an organization and stretch as an organization, or for you personally to grow or stretch inside of the organization and be willing to have conversations with somebody or with other areas of the business that says, hey, this isn't just work, it's just not working. Here's why it's not working, and here's the data that supports why it's not working. So can we talk together about some of the other things that we could do that will drive better performance or enable us to get to a better place? That's the mindset that allows you to grow and the organization to grow and takes the emotion completely out of it. Okay. All right, so next slide. I got 8 minutes left. This is a really good course, guys, that I would encourage you to go take. It's in e-learning. You can go take the course numbers there. I'd also encourage you to go to Percipio. There's lots of really cool courses in Percipio that really walks through navigating emotional intelligence in the workplace and really helps you understand, situations that you may be in, that you will be interacting in, that leveraging and flexing that emotional intelligence skill will help you. Okay, so I would encourage you to do that. The next slide is really a quiz, thanks to Mr. Morton. He went and found this for me, and I would encourage you guys to, when we send this out, click on the quiz, go take it, and it's a freebie that you can do and get to know yourself. And as I said earlier, reflect on situations, but reflect with intent. Okay, reflect with the purpose of working that emotional intelligence muscle. Okay, it is a skill you can grow, but it won't grow if you won't own it and realize where your gaps are and where you are able to improve. So listening to your trusted advisors, listening to your peers, listening to your mentors, having somebody observe you in a difficult conversation and give you feedback afterwards. Those are all ways that you can get to know yourself and see how you respond. Number one thing though, remember, you will always have a physiological response before you have a physical response. Learn what your physiological response is and control your physical response. Okay, next slide. So I'm a big advocate of reading and always growing and learning and listening to podcasts. This book in particular, I've read myself. You can go on to, any of the traditional places that you get books and purchase this one. It's a quick read. I actually think there may be one in the book library, Rob. I'm not sure that we did, but I think this one's probably floating around somewhere. And I would also tell you that at the back of this one, you can also do another online assessment of your emotional intelligence. And the other thing I would suggest to you guys is retest. So develop the skill, stretch the muscle, challenge yourself, reflect on situations, and over time, go back and do the test again and see, is your emotional intelligence level changing or not? Remember, emotional intelligence is often more important than your cognitive intelligence. Okay, so it's really, really important for you to learn. All right, so last slide's just a visual that I put up for you guys for us just to have a discussion. I'd love to see if there's any questions or comments out there. Emotional intelligence is your heart and your head combined together and effectively using both of those to get the outcomes that you're looking for, whether it's you at home, whether it's you working with as a leader in a business, whether it's you working in an environment that you're talking. I've even used this in talking with doctors, organizations, and or interacting with children's schools or all of those things. It's something that's there every single day. And when the stakes are high, remember, your emotional intelligence is at risk and you need to manage it. That's what I had to share with you today. Any questions or comments? We have 5 minutes left.
Cindy, we're getting a ton of really positive comments in the chat. Excellent session. This should be a TED Talk. All kinds of things like that. I would also say, to Cindy's credit, if you notice your manager demonstrates a lot of these skills, a lot of what Cindy works on with the management team is her helping us to develop these skills so that we can take them to you guys. And so, we don't all start that way. Like, it's a learned skill, and Cindy really pushes that on us to keep developing our emotional intelligence. So thank you, Cindy, for that.
100%. We all will respond differently. So it's always one of those skills you need to work on. And
there was a comment that said, that's why Stacy's so good.
Any questions, guys, or are we at
Could we have
time?
the link for the test, please?
Yep, we will send out the link. Absolutely. Oh, hi, Meg. I didn't even know you were there. Yeah, absolutely. We'll send out the link for everybody to have. And again, I'd open up the door, anybody that wants to have a conversation, because, I've been in those dialogues that have gone really, really bad. And I've learned from those situations. And I've learned to kind of know my response. And I'm not going to get them all perfect either, by the way. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Happy Friday. I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.